Hey everybody, there are some minor audio issues with this episode and the next, so please bear with me. I'm trying to get it fixed. I hope you enjoyed this episode, though. On with the show. While some projects are created in moments of creativity, others are created over a lifetime. These projects are emphasized even more when the whole family gets involved. This week, join me, Zach Walsh, as I have a talk about the origins of East Coast Trolls with its creator, Tom. This episode's a little different as there's almost 40 years worth of content to cover, but the journey is fascinating. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover projects that you may have missed. I am very excited about this project this week. As viewers might know, I'm kind of careful with D&D because it's featured a lot. But I think the story around this specific project is really interesting and cool. And so this week, I'm here with Tom from East Coast Trolls. Tom, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks. Thank you for inviting me.
This is something that's really cool, actually. Christian told me about East Coast Trolls, and he was great to have on, and I'm just so excited to have you here.
Yeah, he's. I was really fortunate to run into him in in kind of the virtual world out there with social media. He's a real creative thinker, and I like some of the things that he's doing, and so we kind of hit it off.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I love that app, and I'm really excited to talk about East Coast Trolls. But what a lot of people might not know is this isn't going to be too heavy focused on the actual project this week. So this is something a little bit special.
Yeah, so I think anybody who's launched a Kickstarter knows that it can be a real roller coaster ride, right? And there's lots of real positive lessons that you can learn when you do it. And I come from a large corporate background, and honestly, I overthought our Kickstarter launch for our project. And the community was great. We got some awesome feedback, which is the reason that we decided to take down the original Kickstarter and re-engineer it and put it back up based on all the feedback that we got. But in running into you, we had discussed previously this. We went from in the restructuring the Kickstarter. We went from targeting a delivery of the product, which is a couple of books that we'll talk about later, this fall, to really probably taking a look at Q2 or even early Q3 of next year, because we've scaled it back and slowed it down all at the same time, and we've done that because we're really trying to drive the costs down, and I think that's actually a really good thing because there's not as much pressure with all the team members, and again, something that we can talk about a little bit later. We've got artists and contributors from all over the world, and this takes a little bit of heat off those folks. And so I thought it would be a good idea if we could get together and I could tell you a little bit about the genesis of this project, and then as we get a little bit closer to the actual launch, we can do a deep dive into the content.
Exactly. So this is our first two-part episode that we're going to be doing. But the actual East Coast Trolls episode is going to be coming out later down the line, everybody. So hold on. We're going to talk about the legacy of this project. But before we get into that, Tom, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm not an incredibly interesting person. I'll preface it by saying that. I'm a 55-year-old father of six that has been playing Dungeons and Dragons for more than 40 years, and it's somewhat of a family tradition now. Because I'm a very family focused individual, our games have always been that way, and I think it's important. I think this is a great time to point out, family friendly doesn't mean that it's like watered down. It doesn't mean that we're trying to push some kind of agenda, which I think a lot of people see when they see family friendly, right? This what we want to do, and what we are doing is we want to put content out which is just as enjoyable to your 13 or 14-year-old as it is to a 50 or 60-year-old. And there's a stretch there, and there's a real challenge in that. But I think, as you're going to find out, we're really uniquely positioned to be able to do that because I personally and members of my team and members of my family have run that entire gamut, right? We were the very young, now we are the rather old. I'm not going to say the very old, but we're the rather old, and we still really come together, from a multi-generational standpoint, and it can be a lot of fun. We want a game that's more fun to play than it is to watch on YouTube. And I don't want to get in trouble with that statement, right?
No, not at all.
But that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We want something that is so enjoyable, especially post COVID. It really gets people back around the table, and they can have a really good time with it. And there's like no pressure, and so that's why we're building the tool set we're building. That's why we've gone so deep from a detail standpoint with the material. It really is like a deep world building exercise. So that's a whole. I took off. I know. I'm really sorry. It's a whole lot more than just me, but this game is actually part of who I am, and all of the people that I originally played with, back in the late 70s and then into the early 80s and on from there. I look and I see what these people are doing today. And if you get one of our books, you'll see in the dedication page, because we kind of list it. Because I find it fascinating that, back then, I mean, we were the people that got picked on, quite frankly, right? Like the nerds. And you take a look at this group today, and we're talking like, doctors and teachers and professors and, real successful business folks, and even parents and grandparents. And I attribute a lot of my personal success to that imaginative, creative process that I couldn't have learned anywhere else. So thank you, Gary Gygax. I really appreciate you for introducing it. And, really thank my mom for encouraging it, even through some of the rough times through the 80s.
Yeah, you actually grew up and played D&D during the height of the Satanic Panic.
Oh yeah, and it really hit close to home. I got to tell you, because I had a very conservative upbringing, and I I remember having debates, not with my parents, but with our pastor at the church that we attended. Because everybody was like, Dungeons and Dragons, it's the gateway drug to hell. I mean, that's really, that's what it was, right? And
I know.
right up there with AC/DC and Metallica and all those other guys. And that's why I said, I thank my mom, because she recognized that it was a real constructive thing for us all to get together, even if it did start to turn out to be every single weekend. To sit around a table, and I mean, she saw us play, so and she was really big into theater, and really big into the arts, and she recognized D&D for what it was, right? I mean, this is a story that you're making up in real time as you're going along, unless you're the dungeon master and stupid enough to have volunteered for that. My hands up in the air. but it was an excellent mental exercise, and it was an excellent social exercise. So, if you're a super awkward, 13, 14, 15-year-old, that awkwardness kind of gets left behind because you're playing somebody else, right? You're this like big beefy hero or whatever the case may be. And it in a healthy way, it kind of takes you out of yourself, and enables you to approach everything, especially your communications and how you communicate with people around that table, from a different perspective. And so, yeah, the Satanic Panic was tough. I'll mention, my dad was a police officer, and he was actually a satanic crimes investigator.
Wow.
And I go back and I read. He's gone now, but he had written basically he had written a book that he left behind for his children, so we could really understand what went on for all those decades, that he was working. And some of the stuff was just like, I look at it now and I'm like, wow, people really took this seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up during it. It was tough, but we got over it, right? It was just another one of those things.
So we're going to go a little bit deeper into what East Coast Trolls really is, but we haven't touched up on it really. For the viewers out there, East Coast Trolls is based around your 40-year-old campaign.
Okay, yeah. Yes and no, right?
Okay.
So the campaign world that we have that has been developed over the last 40 years is a place called Capernia, and the adventures that occur in that campaign world are all based on adventures that we have played out not just once but multiple times. I mean, I've recycled these for different generations over the last 40 years, which is a really cool exercise, by the way, because getting to play the same game with a whole new group of people and knowing where you screwed up the first time you played it. And I know people are like, oh, you can't screw up, you're the dungeon master. Yeah, you can. Okay, you absolutely can, but you can learn from it. And it helps you to maintain a much better storyline when you do it the second time. East Coast Trolls, the genesis of that was 10-ish years ago, and I was actually between jobs, and it was the first time we actually thought about taking all this material and putting it together and publishing it. There wasn't Kickstarter or anything back then. It was going to have to be kind of like the traditional, either the traditional publishing route or more like a vanity publishing type of try. But in order to do it, again, I was a business person. I needed an entity, a business entity, that I could use for all the stuff that nobody really cares about, but is necessary when you have a business and you're going to get a product out into the public domain. And we're all sitting around trying to figure out, what we're going to call this thing. And we eventually got around East Coast Trolls, which literally comes from Billy Goat's Gruff and the Trolls Under the Bridge.
Oh, cool.
And I thought, and we thought it was, I thought it was a really cool analogy, just, taking that fairy tale essentially and what it means and, what a troll is. And of course, we're all also tossing around the 3 trolls from The Hobbit because they're everybody's favorite bad guy. And that's how we came up with it. We wanted to be East Coast Trolls. Now, trolls means something a whole lot different like 10 years later. But we decided we didn't care. We were good. This is what we were going to be, and our community are trolls, and we're loving it. So East Coast Trolls is the business. That's how you find us on social media, how you find us on the web. And basically it's a veteran-owned, family-run small publishing house that is working on the Capernia campaign world and the Oak Haven anthologies currently, but we have other projects that we'd like to do, both within the D&D realm and within kind of the D&D realm from a children's book standpoint. So there's a lot of different directions that we'd like to take this if we're successful. In the meantime, everybody's got to, pay their mortgage and put food on the table. So, but we're not rushing anymore. We're taking the slow, steady approach.
I think that is totally reasonable and understandable. So, one of the big things about East Coast Trolls 2, though, and something we got to talk a little bit about when we last spoke, is this game's kind of. You've played with generations of your family.
Yeah.
How'd that all start?
So, yeah, really weird. So, I was introduced to this, to Dungeons and Dragons. It was a box set, and I don't remember the color or what it was. It was 1978. I was at summer camp, and an older camp counselor, older being put everything in perspective, because I was like 13 years old or something like that, 14. And he said, "Hey, you guys want to play a cool game?" And it was D&D, and we played it with this box set, basically some character sheets and some dice and pencils, and that was it. And the next year I went back, and same guy, and he had a player's handbook and a dungeon master's guide, and I read them in a sleeping bag with a flashlight after lights out. And the first thing I did was look at all the pictures, right? I didn't even read the words. I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. This is awesome, right? And so, from there, I got home. I called my best friend. I said, I have discovered the coolest game. We got to get some people together and start playing. And because I was the person who discovered it and knew more than anybody else, I ended up being the dungeon master. Or game master, as they're calling it today, for those first games. And once you do that, you're kind of stuck with it. And I think anybody who's played this game and has been in that position will sympathize. It's not an easy role to back out of once you're into it.
Yeah, the forever DM.
Yeah, the forever DM, right? And so, we would go from house to house, but really it bounced back and forth between my house and friends of mine that were brothers, Russ and Eric, and I won't give their last names.
No.
And they lived the next town over, and their mother made like the best English muffin pizzas. Because everybody, you also know the main thing about D&D, aside from playing the game, is eating, right? And she would like load us with snacks. It was awesome going over there. But as we were playing over at my house, my siblings were like, they wanted to get in, and I was the oldest, right? So at first you're like, no, go away, you're bugging us. But as I got older, I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, you want to join the game, and we're a tight family, very very family oriented, and I grew up in a multi-generational household. So I grew up with my grandparents, and actually the house I grew up in was purchased by my great grandfather. And still in the family today, five generations.
Wow.
My kids are the fifth generation to grow up in the same area, same property. And I said, we were going to have a family game night. And I was like, let's do D&D, because everybody else wanted to do like Monopoly or Clue or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And I think it was my mother who goes, yeah, I think we should try this. And like my grandmother got in and she's like, yeah, we should try this. So for the first time, we had my grandparents and my parents and myself and my siblings around the table, and we played the game. And it was basic, and it was crude, and it was absolutely, and by crude, I don't mean like crude, like nasty crude, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I was doing what DMs do today, man. I was bending the rules and, making it easy for first timers. And everybody was having a really, really good time. Because while we were playing, there was like no age gap there, right? Everybody was on equal footing. And everybody was playing characters that were on equal footing. So it didn't matter that whatever I was, 15 years old, 16 years old, and I was running the game. My grandparents, who then were probably in their as old as I am today and older, right? And my folks, and literally everybody was having fun. And I gotta tell you this story because it's hilarious. I told you my dad was a cop. And
yes.
So we're all sitting around the table, and I was kind of feeling my oats too, right? I'm like, it's a game. Let's see how much I can get away with my parents, right? So they ended up in, and I characterized it as a house of ill repute, right?
Why?
Right. So the whole party is in this bar, in essentially, I guess would be a red light district, and because where's a 15-year-old's mind on a every other basis, at least the boys, and so. We're all playing this, and we're in the bar, and the phone rings, and my mother gets up, and she answers the phone, and it's the police chief, not in the town we live in, but the town my dad worked in, and he asks for my father, and I see this little sparkle in my mother's eyes because I'm looking up, my father's looking over and starting to get out of his chair, and my mother says, "Oh, he can't come to the phone right now. He's in a house of ill repute." It was just the look of horror on my dad's face and the look of pure glee on my mother's face was just it was awesome. It really was awesome, and my grandparents are trying not to laugh, and it was just one of those. It was a funny moment, and we relive it every once in a while and talk about how it was, but I think it was really indicative of just that the closeness, right, that playing a game like this can generate. And so anyway, I mean, it went from there. I played a little bit when I was overseas in the Army. I came back and got together with my friends every once in a while, for a game night kind of deal. And then before I knew it, I was married and I had kids of my own. And there's probably there was a decent sized lag in there, which is okay because I think we kind of basically skipped over second edition, which is good because it really we didn't miss much, right? And by the time my oldest kids were like, "Hey, Dad," I still had lead figures up on my bookshelves and stuff, and they'd start asking about it, and they're like, "Yeah, we'd like to play that game too." And I'm like, "Oh, that's easy, right? All I got to do is open the box that has reams of papers in it, and start them out, and in the same spot that really so many other people had in the past." And so we did. My oldest is 29. My youngest is 9, and they're kind of sort of in two groups. So the first 3 went through playing with their friends and their friends' friends, and then the next set of 3 got old enough to play, and here we are almost 10 years later, and it's with their groups, and that's kind of where we are today, and working with. Also, we work with a local middle school, and kind of advise their D&D clubs, and it's I guess it's a lifestyle. I guess that's the really. I mean, I think that's
it makes sense.
That's kind of it's the best way to put it, and it's not. A game of D&D is an evolving story, right? In yes. Real time. But if you're DM long enough, your game also ends up being an evolving story and gets deeper and richer the longer you continue to play it. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to become boring or stale because it's your world, right? And you can make that world as deep and rich as you want to, and and there's nothing wrong with jumping to another world, right? No. But when you think about it, a world is a big place. It's so big it allows for almost infinite diversity, in characters and encounters, and anything else that you can possibly think of. So I'm really fortunate. I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate to, have started a story and been able to continue to tell and refine that story over such a long period of time.
Capernia is very long, very old now at this point for most games. What does it take to create a campaign setting like that?
You got to be a little nuts. No, I think, yeah, and here I am. I'm going to end up like airing out all like my dirty laundry and my secrets on your podcast. I'm one of those people whose my imagination is running all the time. My wife has accused me a couple times of being crazy because she says I'm talking to myself in the shower. And sometimes when I'm talking to myself, it's because I'm having a conversation, and I'm not nuts, right? But I'm having a conversation between a whole bunch of different characters and like playing that out in my head and refining who they are. The other thing is it can't be superficial, right? So I remember, when I first started playing this and started playing it with friends, we went down to the local hobby store, which had a very limited supply of, like dungeon modules, right?
Yeah.
Things like, Queen of the Demon web pits, right? And the world, Greyhawk was like the first world that I had some exposure to. I had bought that. And quite honestly, the reason that we stopped using those things is we didn't have all that much money to blow on a game, right? And this stuff was expensive. And besides, if we had any spare money, what we really wanted was the lead figures, right? Miniatures were, pewter lead back in the day. And so I started creating this world, this setting that we're going to play in. And accidentally, not on purpose at all, but quite accidentally, I kind of fell into the same approach that Tolkien used, where if you're going to start to answer, once players start to ask whys, right? That's like a 2-year-old. You tell a 2-year-old to do something, they go why, and then you give them an answer and they go why, right? That D&D players, man. Especially younger D&D players are the exact same. If you're going to have the answers to those whys, you need a whole lot more than kind of like the typical room, right? You open the wooden door and there's 2 chests and a beat up bunk and a couple of goblins in a stone room, 10 by 10 or 10 by 15. Woohoo! I mean that doesn't give you very much, especially when they want to start to know, well, why, what. Once they kill the goblins and they're digging around for treasure, they start to want to know the whys. And to know the whys, even the goblins have to have a backstory, right? And their tribe has to have a backstory and how the tribe got there. And it actually starts to build on itself to the point. One of the things that we've had ongoing for the last 2 years is a language project.
Oh.
We decided to build a new language, which we refer to as Old Capernian, because that's written into the narrative from scratch. And I've got a con linguist on the team, and some other folks who are not as proficient, or professional when it comes to linguistics. But our con linguist keeps us on the straight and narrow, and the reason that we started building the language in the first place is because we wanted to be able to write our own song, and we wanted the song to be in a language that was unique to Capernia, and Capernia language and the evolution of language and magic and the way magic works is very intertwined. So to be able to sell that, not sell it dollars wise, but sell that conceptually, we really needed the language, right? we really needed to be able to, if you're going to have if a word or two words ends up being drawn out or can be drawn out into an incantation, it's got to make sense. Okay, so maybe it doesn't have to make sense, but it's a heck of a lot more fun and more immersive if it does make sense. And I'm really, really big on total immersion. Like, as deep as I can get people, it's like going to a Marvel movie. You're in there, that, that those characters can't do those things in real life, but you're willing to suspend your grasp on reality so that you can really enjoy that movie. And you end up cheering for them, right? And then people will go on social media and complain about why a certain power didn't work, man, because they bought into it. And that's one of the reasons it's taken so long to build Capernia to a point where I actually wanted to publish it, is because in order to get to that level of immersion, you've got to have a huge level of detail. I'm talking too much.
No, you're fine. It's an interview podcast. You should be talking.
I know. I really get excited about it,
Oh, that's what we like to see here, though.
Cool.
So East Coast Trolls is still currently in development, and you've increased the team. Can you talk about the team increases?
Yeah. So, all right, remember I was saying the very first thing I did when I got my very first copy of, and the first book was the Dungeon Master's Guide. And I told you I looked at it with a flashlight, in a sleeping bag, and I was checking out the pictures. And every book that I bought back when it was TSR, and then Wizards of the Coast, and then all of the content, the side content that started to get developed and now has just gone completely insane in a great way today. The one commonality, good content, is good art, right? And it can't be just good art. It has to be great art, right? Because otherwise, why would somebody actually want a print book anymore, right? You want it because you want to be able to open it up and look at it and and stare at it and feel the pages. So our goal for Volume 1 of the Campaign World was I think 147 original illustrations.
Wow.
And that's again, one of the reasons that that we took the first Kickstarter down is it was a very expensive Kickstarter, and I don't think and bad on me because I'm in charge. I don't think we did a good job in explaining to folks why it was so expensive, and I want to get into the minutia there, but one of the reasons 147 illustrations is I'll challenge you to go out to any of the major publications that even come out by Wizards of the Coast. We are at or above them from a illustration standpoint, and I thought that was really important, right? Because that's part of the color palette that we're using to tell a story, right? It helps people can look and it helps that immersive process. So when I first looked at this, and full disclosure, my oldest daughter is our art director. She's super talented, which is why I pegged her for this. I was like, I want to use new artists that nobody's ever seen. In fact, let's find artists that have probably not been published that are really good, and if we're successful, we can be their break, right? And it'll be a win-win. It'll be a win-win for everybody. And she really jumped all over that. And before long, she was out on all the art websites and looking for people. But the other criteria I said was I want this to be American made. Oh boy, that was me showing my age, right? And as it turns out, although we have two Americans, part, on in with our artistic team. We've got 15 contributing artists right now, and only 2 of them are locals, so to speak. What I have discovered, what's really cool is we've got contributing artists now on 5 continents from like 8 countries or 9 countries, something like that. And thank goodness for like Microsoft Teams and Google Meet and video conferencing and the internet, because it's like these people are right next door to us. And we've made some awesome friends. And in doing that, we've gotten, they brought some of their friends in, and that community is continuing to grow. And it's also helping us, quite honestly, from a business standpoint, because, someone who, may have done some card artwork for, Wizards of the Coast, for instance, is going to be super pricey. This has also enabled us to get some artwork and get it in a range that the project can afford to do. And, I'm a big, we win as a team, or we all go down together like the Titanic, singing "Near My God to Thee" as we slip beneath the waves. But if we win together, we win together. And, one of the things that in building out the team like this, it's been a mutual success formula. Although we pay for every illustration that we put in up front, we also have a royalty plan that we put together with everybody. And we put it together. We didn't even have it together when we started bringing artists on board. We actually got their input. What do you think is fair? And so it's been a great, that aspect of it has also been a great collaborative aspect, and getting the input from people from, different countries, a different approach sometimes from a cultural standpoint, has both been enriching for the team, and I think enriching for the content also. And then I think one of the most unique things is we engage voice artists, and everybody's like, huh? I told you that I'm really about as immersive experience as possible, but I still want this to be a tabletop game, right? I don't want it to be a video game. I don't want it to be flavored like a video game at all. But there is there are some extraordinarily popular YouTube channels and Twitch channels out there that have some incredibly mind-blowingly talented people playing this game, and I wish I had more time so I could watch them more often. I do sometimes when I'm flying on business because I'm on a plane and stuck, and it blows my mind. But I can also see, I try to keep my finger kind of like on the pulse of, conversations and comments out on social media. And it's true. If my 14-year-old, if their first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons was watching these, or listening to podcasts, or watching these videos, and they get together with their friends and they try to recreate that experience, they're liable to slam into a brick wall of disappointment. Because they're not pros. They're not great voice actors. I'm not a great voice actor. I'm horrible at doing accents and so on and so forth. So I was like, well, how can we try to address that particular problem? And in building the website for East Coast Trolls, we wanted to tell a snippet of the story kind of as a teaser, right? And I wanted to do it from an audio standpoint. And again, went out on voiceovers.com.
Yes, they're great.
Right, exactly what the website was. Threw the project out there, put a really detailed description, had a ton of people say, yep, one in on this, and sent reels, right, on the script that we had sent. And we auditioned almost, I think 29 or 30 voice artists off of that. Got it narrowed down to 6. Sent them even more kind of like backstory to help them with their performance. And in the end, we got this great performance out of one particular voice artist. And we mixed it and we listened to it, and I was like, yeah, that's it. This is what we need to do. Because there's always that encounter where you've got a major NPC, and the initial part of the encounter is the interplay between the NPC and the party. And a lot of times that starts with a bit of a monologue because you're trying to set the stage. And I said, if we did the monologues and we used professional voice actors, and had some, a little bit of background music going in there, a little bit of sound effects, so that setting the stage was done in that fashion, that would help. It would play to people's desire for that, professional D&D player experience within their home game. But at the same time, those are embedded in the digital editions of the campaign world and of the Oakhaven anthologies, and the actual text is there too, along with the backstories and the other things, the same things that we provided to the voice actors. So if you're a seasoned dungeon master and you want to do it yourself because you're great with voices, or even if you just think you're great with voices, the stuff is all right there. You don't have to use it. It's another tool that you can use to make the game more yours. The English wasn't correct there, but
I think we understood what it was. So we're actually starting to run really short of time, but I have one more question for you.
yeah.
I know that you have been doing this for a long time, and your kids are involved with it.
Yep.
What do you want to see happen with Capernia and East Coast Trolls as you get older?
I kind of see this as a retirement gig, and on, not like I'm going to buy my own private island retirement gig, but
yeah,
just when I get to that point where I find I have a lot more time on my hands, and more time that I can spend with friends and family and so on and so forth. It's just going to give me more opportunity to continue to add details to this world and to these adventures. My daughter, Tori, is a really good DM. One of my sons also. And my 14-year-old started the D&D club at his middle school and made the mistake of volunteering, and he's at least the forever DM, I would imagine, until he graduates. And all this stuff is there for them to use, and more importantly, there for them to build on. You will see, we probably won't post it for another week or two because we're still playing with coloration. But with the world map, we're going to get up on our website, and one of the continents on the world map, I completely set it aside because, hey, it's a world and I didn't need it. And my daughter Tori took it and ran with it, and really has a whole other series of adventures that she's set there, that are very unique and not at all like some of the settings and encounters that you get in kind of the main part of Capernia. So I know they're going to keep using this stuff. I hope I have grandchildren one of these days. I would love to do that. I think that would be an absolute hoot. Before I'm gone, being able to say, I played a game with my grandparents and then I played it later with my grandchildren. I'm only 55, so I think it'll be really cool to be one of those people that, quite frankly, I'm kind of one of the old timers that's hanging on for good or for ill, So I just it's a legacy, and it's a legacy that I'm going to leave to my kids, and they can do with it as they see fit, because then it will be their world to grow in their world to play with. And as far as East Coast Trolls go, I'd really like to use it to be able to get our content out there. We have a real love for getting young people into the game, and I'd like to be able to leverage East Coast Trolls to do that. And there are other areas of fantasy publishing that we may or may not address going down the road. It is completely up in the air. Every once in a while, I'll roll a 20-sided die. And as long as it's not a natural one, we should be able to keep plugging.
That's great. I love to hear that. So, Tom, before we go,
yeah,
can I get you to tell everybody where we can find you?
Yeah, sure. You can find us. Where can everybody find us? You can find us on the web at eastcoasttrolls.com. And you can, if you look on Twitter, we're there as East Trolls. On Instagram, we're East Coast Trolls. And on Facebook, we're East Coast Trolls. So, and if you run into any of those, you'll probably find our Linktree account, which will bring you to every place that you either wanted to be or didn't want to be. That has to do with our merry band of mischief makers here.
Perfect. As always, everybody, those are going to be linked down in the description. Tom, thank you so much for coming onto the show tonight. I'm really excited to do this again in a couple weeks or a couple months once we get there.
Yeah, I really appreciate the invite, and it's been great sharing this with you. And I look forward to the next time we can get together and do some deep dive into content and sneak peek behind the scenes kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too.
Cool.
So, Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Audience, you're welcome. Audience, thank you for listening tonight. Tom and East Coast Trolls, they're scheduled to launch real soon, so pay attention and you'll hear from me when they get there. Have a good night. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much to Tom for coming onto the show this week. I know we didn't get much of a chance to go over the content of the actual book, but it's getting ready. It's going to be back on Kickstarter soon. Tom and I felt that it would be a bit too much to cover in one episode, so we're going over the history first. A part 2 will be coming out in the future, so look forward to that. Once again, though, thank you everyone for your continued support. Interacting with you all has been absolutely wonderful, and I'm really excited to hear more from you. Next week's episode will be out on August 17th, where Matt, creator of the zombie tabletop role-playing game They Stirred, will come and tell us about his game. Can't wait for you to hear that one. Take care and have a good week.